Tonight we're going to celebrate and commemorate the folks at Altec. Can you give a couple of instances of individuals within that Altec 35-person investor group that sort of made the difference from them to really take them? They went into bankruptcy, out of bankruptcy. I mean, they had, it wasn't always that easy, but there were some leaders there.
Well, that's the way it's always is. It's never easy. Running a business is, again, I said it before, I mean, when you're done with Tuesday, you worry about Wednesday. And Dr. Adolf Lehner was the heart and soul of the team that they put together. Marvin Hine, who wasn't originally a part of the original deal, was the financial guy that I worked with on many aspects of Altec as we moved along, and we tried to continue to be a resource to meet their challenges that they were faced with all the time. But certainly Jim Minton was, you know, one of the key guys, and I will look forward to re-meeting after 40 years some of the original guys who are still with us that were part of that original 35. But those are the guys who are the heroes. Those are the guys who put up their money. Those are the guys who went to work the next day when they owned it and said, poof, it's now ours. It's not part of a big corporate conglomerate. Now, mind you, that corporate conglomerate was going to close it down, going to shut down Altec, and we saved it. But it was them who saved it. You know, we were a midwife, but they saved it.
Well, what's the real legacy of all that?
It's the purpose of an excuse me. It's the purpose of an economic development program, whether it's this Altec program or an IDA overall, to create an atmosphere where somebody is willing to step up and say, I want to create or save a business. That was the atmosphere in which Paul Sandberg said I should work in, I should create. Again, he being my mentor. And that's the work that we did every day. Celebrating people willing to invest. And then asking them, as a price of doing business, to talk to 2 or 3 other business people to come and challenge us to do it for them. So it was that atmosphere, as opposed to an atmosphere which says economic development are various government programs. And if you can qualify for those government programs, we might be able to help you. So here's 25,000 pages of paperwork to fill out, and get back to us when you got them done. That's not how we operated. So, for example, when Dick Allison brought his team into Jamestown to take a look at the Cummins plant, or the art metal plant that became the Cummins plant, I walked through the door with Dick Allison the first day. It was so embarrassing. The place was a mess. I had never been in there prior to that day. There were things hanging from the ceiling. There were garbage strewn everywhere. And he looked at me with a little smile on his face and said, how long have you been doing this job? And I said, not very long. And he says, it shows. He says, I'm going to make a deal with you. He said, if in 30 days you can get this place cleaned up and worthy to take a look at, we might come back to look a second time. And in 30 days, we got that place cleaned up. I mean, it should have been done prior to that, but we brought in garbage trucks and we cleaned the place out. And we brought golf cars down from Maplehurst Country Club, and so we had a whole stable of cars to run around that plant when they came back. Well, when they came back, it was ready to be viewed, and thank God they did come back. Mm-hmm. But again, we were trying to create an atmosphere with Cummins to say, this is the place you want to be. We really are interested in you being here. And we walk him into a place that looked like it had been bombed. So we learned, and Cummins was a great story unto itself.
Let's talk. We got a few more minutes if you have. Let's talk about Cummins while I have you here.
Well, Cummins clearly came here for the reasons that the plant was here. the million-square-foot plant not here, Cummins wouldn't be in Jamestown. They had been contacted by people not in my department, but by, I believe, people in the town of Busti who were interested to see that plant alive again. And sure enough, we got the call that their team was putting Jamestown and Lakewood and town of Busti on the visit list for a number of locations across the country. And thus the visit by Dick Allison, who became the first general manager of Cummins here in Jamestown, and about 10 other guys that came, guys and girls, came out to look at school systems and hospital systems and everything else. Well, given the disappointment of the first visit and working real hard to make sure that they came back from the second visit, they felt, after discussions with people like Stan Lundeen, who had been working very hard at labor management relations between companies here in town. Bill Evans was the chairman, businessman in Lakewood, a chairman of our community group that interfaced with the Cummins people, and so we got non-politicians, we got business people to talk to business people. And I can remember going out with the Cummins teams, and we would go to bars and sit down, and they would interview people who worked at other factories and worked in other businesses and say, what's it like to live here, and how do you like your particular employer, and are there any tensions at your work site? Because they wanted to put in a work system in Jamestown, which is totally different than the work conditions that they have out in Indiana, where they're headquartered, in Columbus, Indiana. They wanted a non-union, they wanted a team-based approach to manufacturing. They became convinced that they could get that done here in Jamestown. We put together a package, kind of as a result of the LTEC program. The state of New York had bankruptcy problems at the time. The state authorities had bankruptcy problems at the time, and they literally could not help. And in fact, they were a hindrance. We put together a $10.5 million deal with the Farmers Home Administration in Syracuse, a guy named Lowell Gibson, who wanted to get a piece of the LTEC glory. Because of what EDA had done, with EDA being a competitor economic development agency of the federal government, Lowell, who was a friend of mine, said, we'll do Cummins. And so we put together this $10.5 million deal with Cummins on the heels of doing the $10 million deal with Altec. And then we did a lot of other things. I mean, they were told, for example, that by the insurance company, they couldn't live off the wells. They had to have a public water system. So I sat, and going through the permitting process and getting this thing done was going to be way too lengthy for their insurance agency to be willing to insure the plant. So they couldn't operate the plant without insurance. So Jim Gronquist was the BPU director here in Jamestown. Dale Robbins was the town supervisor in the town of Busti. We put together a deal to build, IDA would build with BPU and Busti, a water system out to the Cummins plant without any of the normal procedures, because we had to get the line out there. So we just did it. And when we were done, you know, the state of New York said, you know, you got to go through a permit process here. You've got to get a water district created. You've got to get this and you got to get that. And we said we were sorry, but we got it done. I mean, that's an example. Cummins wanted a new driveway. We built them a new driveway. The current driveways were too steep for the trucks that were going to come in and out of there. So it was a combination of a lot of people, a lot of resource, a lot of good ideas on town people's parts, county parts, and certainly Cummins parts, and we got the deal done.
Who from within Cummins made the decision? I mean, it was a corporate decision, but ultimately it's personal. Somebody had to look David Dawson and others in the eyes and say, I believe you guys.
Well,
is that Dick?
Without Dick Allison saying yes, it wouldn't have happened. Dick eventually not only was a plant manager, but he rose up into the organization very high, and still alive today, and I believe is retired, but they had a very charismatic CEO of Cummins at the time, and I wish I could remember his name, but it's jumping out of my head right now. But obviously, he and their board had to agree. But again, they were looking for a building that size, and they were looking for a community that they could put a work system in that they felt was going to be different than the work system that they had in Columbus, Indiana. So Dick convinced them that we've looked at it hard enough, and we feel that the building will work, and we feel the community will work with us in getting the things we need done. We put a whole training center. JCC's help and other resource help, we put a whole training center in there to hire the first employees at Cummins, because obviously nobody in Jamestown had made diesel engines before.